Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Village School by Miss Reed. Chapter 3, The Pattern of the Morning. My desk was being besieged by children, all eager to tell me of their holiday adventures. "Miss, us went to Southsea for the Mothers' Union last week, and I brought you back a stick of rock," announced Anne. Eric flapped a long rubbery piece of seaweed like a flail. "It's for us to tell the weather by," he explained earnestly. "You hangs it up, out the lobby'll do, and if it's wet it's going to rain, or is it if it's been wet it feels wet? I forgets which, Miss, but anyhow if it's dry it ain't going to rain." "Isn't," I automatically corrected, rummaging in the top drawer for the desk of the dinner book. "I know where there's mushrooms, Miss. I'll bring you some for your tea 'safternoon." "They's not mushrooms, Miss," warned Eric. "They's toadstools. Honest, Miss, don't you eat 'em. They's poison." I waved them away to their desks. Only the new children stood self-consciously in the front, looking at their shoes or at me for support. Linda Moffat's immaculate pink frock and glossy curls were getting a close scrutiny from the other children, but, unperturbed, she returned their round-eyed stares. The children sit two to a desk, and Anne, a cheerful 9-year-old, seemed Linda's best deskmate. "Look after Linda, Anne," I said. "She doesn't know anyone yet." Holding her diminutive red handbag, Linda settled down beside Anne. They gave each other covert looks under their lashes, and when their glances met, exchanged smiles. The 4 young ones, just up from Miss Clare's class, settled in 2 desks at the front. Once sitting in safety, their shyness vanished, and they looked cheerfully about, grinning at their friends. They were at that engaging stage of losing their front milk teeth, and their gappy smiles emphasized their tender years. I went over to the piano. "As we haven't given out the hymn books yet, we'll sing one we know by heart." They scrambled to their feet, desk seats clanging up behind them, and piped "The King of Love My Shepherd Is," rather sharp with excitement. Our piano is made of walnut and is full of ears. The front has an intricate fretwork design, and through the openings pleated red silk can be seen. The children look upon its venerable beauties with awed admiration. It has a melancholy plangent tone and 2 yellow keys which are obstinately dumb. These keys give a curiously syncopated air to morning hymns. Usually the whole school comes into this one classroom for prayers, but on the first morning of term it always seems best to stay in our own rooms and settle in quickly. After the hymn, we had a short prayer. With eyes screwed up tightly and hands solemnly folded beneath their chins, the children looked misleadingly angelic. Patrick, the smallest, with head bowed low, was busily sucking his thumb, and I made a mental note that here was a habit to be corrected, or otherwise his new second teeth would soon be in need of a brace. As I watched, a shilling fell from his clasped hands and rolled noisily toward me. Patrick opened one eye. It swiveled round like a solitaire marble following the shilling's journey. Then, catching my own eye upon it, it shut again with a snap. After prayers, we usually have a scripture lesson or learn a new hymn or a psalm until 9:30, when arithmetic lessons begin. But on this morning, we settled to more practical matters, and the children came out in turn with their dinner money for the week. This was 9 pence a day. Some children had also brought national savings money, and this was entered in a separate book and stamps handed over to the child if it possessed a safe place to put them, or put in a special OXO tin until home time. All but 4 children who went home for their dinners brought out their dinner money, and as they put it on my desk, I looked at their hands. Sometimes they arrive at school so filthy, either through playing with mud on the way or through sheer neglect in washing, that they are not fit to handle their books, and then out they are sent to the stone sink in the lobby to wash in rainwater and carbolic soap. In this way, too, I can keep a watch on the nail-biters, and those culprits who, after a week's self-control, can show a proud 1/16 of an inch, are rewarded with sweets and flattery. Scabies, too, which first shows itself between the fingers, is a thing to watch for, though happily it is rare here. But it spreads quickly and is very aggravating to the sufferer. While I was busy with all this, Miss Clare came through the partition door. "May I speak to Kathy?" she asked. "It's about Joseph's dinner money. Does his mother want him to stay?" "Yes, miss," said Kathy, looking rather startled, "but she never gave me no money for him." "Didn't give me any money," Miss Clare said automatically. "Didn't give me any money, I mean," repeated Kathy, parrot-wise. "I'll write a note for you to take to Mrs. Coggs when you go home," said Miss Clare, and lowering her voice to a discreet whisper, turned to me. "May be difficult to get the money regularly from that family, a feckless woman." And shaking her white head, she returned to the infants. The children were now beginning to get restless, for normally, when I was busy, they would take out a library book or a notebook of their own making, which we call a busy book, in which they could employ themselves in writing lists of birds, flowers, makes of cars, or any other things which interested them. They could, if they liked, copy down the multiplication tables, or the weekly poem or spelling list which hung upon the wall, but at the moment their desks were empty. "Let me see who would like to come out and play left and right," I said. Peace reigned at once. Chests were flung out, and faces assumed a fierce air of responsibility and trustworthiness. "Patrick," I called, choosing the smallest new boy, and he flushed deep pink with pleasure. Left and right is the simplest and most absorbing game for occasions when a teacher is busy with something else. All that is needed is a small object to hide in one's hand, a morsel of chalk, a bead, or a halfpenny, any one, in fact, of the small things that litter the inkstand. The child in front, hands behind him, exchanges the treasure from one to the other, then, fists extended before him, he challenges someone to guess which hand it is in. Here the teacher, with half an eye on the game, 1.5 on the business in hand, and her main object, peace, in which to carry it out, can say, "Choose someone really quiet, dear. No fussy people, and of course no one who asks." This deals a severe blow to the naughty little boys who are whispering, "Me, choose me, or else." "Richard," called Patrick to his desk mate. "Left." "No, right," said Patrick, opening a sticky palm. "That's left, miss, that was left," went up the protesting cry. Patrick turned round to me indignantly. "But you're facing the other way now," I pointed out, and the age-long problem which puzzles all children had to be explained yet again. At last the game continued its even tenor. Dinner money and savings money were both collected, checked, and put in their separate tins. The register was called for the first time, and a neat red stroke in every square showed that we were all present. The clock on the wall said 10 when we finished handing out a pink exercise book each for English, a blue for arithmetic, and a green for history and geography. Readers, pens, pencils, rulers, and all the other paraphernalia of daily school life were now stored safely, and at the moment tidily, in their owner's possession. The children collected milk and straws and settled down to refreshment. Luckily, this term there were no milk haters, and all 22 bottles were soon emptied. When they had finished, they went joyfully out to play. I went across to my own quiet house and switched on the kettle. 2 cups and saucers were already set on the tray in the kitchen, and the biscuit tins stood on the dresser. Miss Clare would be over in a minute. We took it in turns to do playground duty, guarding the coke pile from marauders, watching out for any sly teasing, and routing out the indoor lovers who would prefer to sit in their desks even on the loveliest days. I went back to the playground while the kettle boiled. Linda was undoing her packet of chocolate, and Anne was trying to look unconcerned. Anne was always rather hungry, the child of a mother who went by the early morning bus to the Atomic Research Works some miles away, and who had little time to leave such niceties as elevenses for her daughter. There was no shortage of money in this home, but definitely a shortage of supervision. Anne's shoes were good but dirty. Her dinner money was often forgotten, and her socks frequently sported a hole. Her suspense now was short-lived, for Linda broke off a generous piece of her slab, handed it over, and cemented the friendship which had already begun. "Do you mind being new?" asked Anne squelchily. "Not now," answered Linda. "Once all that starin' stopped, I don't mind. If anyone tries hittin' me, my mum said I was to tell her." She eyed the noisy children around her complacently. "Not that they will, probably. And anyways," she added, dropping her voice to a sinister whisper, "I bites terrible." Anne looked properly impressed. Kathy, between bites of apple, was encouraging Joseph Coggs and her young brother to visit the boys' lavatory behind its green corrugated iron screen. At the other end of the playground, similarly screened, were two more bucket-type lavatories with well-scrubbed wooden seats for the girls' use. Mr. Willett is our caretaker and has the unenviable job of emptying the buckets 3 times a week, and this he does into deep holes which are dug on a piece of waste ground some 100 yards away behind his own cottage. Mrs. Pringle, the school cleaner, scrubs seats and floors, and everything is kept as spotless as is possible with this deplorable and primitive type of sanitation. Above the shouting of the children came the sound of the school gate clanging shut, and across the playground, his black suit glossy in the sunlight, came the vicar. Miss Clare hurried in to fetch another cup and saucer from the dresser, and I went to meet him. The Reverend Gerald Partridge has been vicar of Fairacre and its adjoining parish of Beech Green for only 4 years, and so is looked upon as a foreigner by most of his parishioners. His energetic wife is as brisk and practical as he is gentle and vague. He is chairman of the managers of Fairacre School and comes in every Friday morning to take a scripture lesson with the older children. On this morning he carried a list of hymns, which he asked me to teach the children during the term, and I said I would look through them. He sighed at my guarded manner, for he knew as well as I did that not all the hymns would be considered suitable for me to teach to children. But his weakness for the metaphysical poets led him into choosing quite inexplicable hymns about showers and brides, with lines like, "Rend each man's temple veil and bid it fall." Or worse still, Milton's poems set as hymns containing such lines as, "And speckled vanity will sicken soon and die, and leprous sin will melt from earthly mold." All of which may be very fine in its way, but is quite beyond the comprehension of the pupils here. The vicar smiles and nods his mild old head when I protest. "Very well, my dear, very well, just as you think best. Let us leave that hymn until they are older." And then he meanders away to talk to the children, leaving me feeling a bully and browbeater. He drank his tea and then started up his car, setting off very slowly and carefully down to the vicarage. Chapter 4. The Pattern of the Afternoon. One of the most difficult things to teach young children is to express themselves in sentences. When you listen to them talking, you realize why. There is hardly a complete sentence in the whole conversation. "Coming up shop?" says one. "Can't, Mum's bad." "What's up with her?" "Dunno." "Doctor come?" "Us rung up, may come, s'pose," and so on. There is a sure exchange of thought and some progress in this staccato method, but it does not make for any literary style when it comes to writing a composition. The children in these parts are not, as a whole, great readers. A neighboring schoolmaster, Mr. Annett, put it succinctly. Most parents take the viewpoint of, "What the devil are you doing wasting your time with a trashy book when the carrots want thinning?" Or the beans want picking, or the wood wants chopping, or the snow wants sweeping, any of the urgent outdoor matters which beset a country child more than the town one. So out they are sent with a clump on the ear to help them, and it almost seems wrong to some of them to read. Because of this attitude and the children's own very understandable desire to help in outside activities in an agricultural area, they do not get accustomed to seeing or hearing thought expressed in plain English. A great number of them have great difficulty in spelling other than phonetically, for they are not readers by habit and not familiar with the look of words. However, phonetically, they make the most gallant efforts, and one of the nicest I ever received being the information that donkeys like thistles, spelled SSOS. So, after play, we settled down to writing together on the blackboard a composite account of the holidays. John, tell me something that you did. Went to the seaside, miss. How? Bus? By yourself? No, lots of us kids went. Us went with the Mothers' Union, miss. Right. Now put all that into sentences that I can write on the blackboard. There was a horrified silence. It was one thing to answer leading questions, but quite another to put them into even the simplest English. Well, come along. You can start by saying, during the holidays I went to the seaside. John repeated this with some relief, hoping that left to my own devices, I would do the whole composition for him. The first sentence was put up. What shall we put up next? I went in a bus, said Anne. I put it up. Now what? I went with the Mothers' Union. I went with some others. I went on a Saturday. I went with my sister. I pointed out that although these were all good sentences in themselves, it became a little monotonous to start every one with I went. It was while we were wrestling with different wordings of the sentences that footsteps and clankings were heard. Sylvia rushed to the door and revealed Mrs. Crossley, or as the children call her, the dinner lady. She was balancing 3 tin boxes in an unsteady pile against her cardigan, and willing hands relieved her of them. Only 2 canisters today, she said, and the children sat rigidly, hoping to be the lucky person chosen to fetch them from the mobile dinner van at the school gate. Anne and Linda were chosen for this envied task, and while they were gone, I signed the daily chit for Mrs. Crossley to say that I had received the number of dinners ordered. Then I gave her the slip showing how many dinners I estimated that I should need for the next day. Mrs. Crossley drives the dinner van, loaded up about 10 in the morning at the depot, and delivers dinners to about a dozen schools on her round of about 20 miles. Each school has a plate heating oven, which is switched on just before the dinners are due, and the tins are put in to keep warm with the plates. The big canisters are heat-retaining and very heavy to handle. Stews, hot potatoes, and other vegetables, custards or sauces are delivered in these, and the meals are usually very good indeed. In the summer, salads are frequent, and the children eat most things heartily, except fish. This, even when fried, is not relished, and recently it has been struck off the menu as there was so much wasted. Kathy was sent through to the infants' room to see if the tables were ready. Miss Clare's class had gone out for the last period of the morning to have their physical training lesson, leaving the classroom empty for the arrangement of 3 trestle tables for the dinner children. Miss Clare had switched on the oven, which was in her room, and Kathy laid the tables for 30. Those who went home to dinner were sent off, the others washed their hands, and then we all took our places at the tables. It was 12, and we were all hoping for something good in the tins. Miss Clare and I served out slices of cold meat, mashed potatoes, and salad, and Sylvia and Kathy and Anne carried them round. Miss Clare sat at the head of one table and I at another, and when we had finished, the 2 big boys, John and Ernest, cleared away. This was followed by plums and custard. Jimmy Waits was still rather awed by his new surroundings and ate very little, but Joseph Coggs, who I suspect very seldom had a dinner as well prepared as this, ate a prodigious amount, coming up for a 3rd helping of plums and custard with the older children. When we had stacked the dirty crockery and cutlery ready for Mrs. Pringle and cleared the tables of their checked Macintosh tablecloths, the children went out to play, and Miss Clare and I went over to the schoolhouse to wash ourselves and tidy up ready for afternoon school. Mrs. Pringle was surrounded by clouds of steam when I returned to the lobby. "Did you have a good holiday?" I asked her. "Not much of a holiday for me, scrubbing this whole place out," was the rejoinder. "Well, it all looks very nice, anyway." "How long for?" said Mrs. Pringle acidly. She is one of the happy martyrs of this world, hugging her grudges to her and relishing every insult as a toothsome morsel. Why she carries out the job of a school caretaker, I can't think, unless its very nature, that of work quickly undone, appeals to her warped spirit. Children she looks upon as conspirators against cleanliness and order, and the idea of any sort of mess of their making being accidental, or worse still, legitimate, is unbelievable to her. Her great loves are the two slow-burning tortoise stoves. These two ugly monsters she polishes till they gleam like jet, and it gives her real pain to see them lit with the ashes dropping untidily round them. The coke cauldrons are a torture to her, for these make more mess, and during the winter months relations are more than usually strained between us. There is almost a battle when it comes to starting up the stoves at the approach of cold weather. I refuse to have the children sitting in a cold schoolroom, incapable of work and the prey of any germs at large, when the stoves are there and mountains of coke stand between us and misery. Mrs. Pringle's methods are subtle when I have given firm orders for the stove to be lit. For a day or two she stalls with, "Ran out of matches," or "Mr. Willett did say he'd bring up the kindlin' wood, but he ain't done it yet." But finding that I have lit the fire myself, she gives in and continues, most reluctantly, to renew it each day. This does not mean to say that the matter is closed, far from it. For should she have occasion to enter the room, she will fan herself ostentatiously with her hand, often mauve with cold, and say, "Hugh, how can you stick this heat? I don't know. Makes me come over real faint myself." Sometimes the attack is on a broader front, and the ratepayers are brought in as support. "Coke's going down pretty smartish. Shouldn't be surprised if we don't get a letter from the office the way we gets through it. Stands to reason the office has to keep upsides the ratepayers." The office is, of course, the local education office, and the only real link between it and Mrs. Pringle is the check which arrives from it for her services at the end of every month. Mrs. Pringle consequently looks upon the office in rather the same way as she looks upon the Almighty, invisible and omnipotent. This afternoon I beat a retreat into my classroom, but was closely pursued by Mrs. Pringle, dripping from the elbows. "What's more," she said malevolently, "we're a spoon short. You been mixing up paste again?" "No," I said shortly. "You better count them again." This is an old feud dating from 5 years ago, when I once committed the unforgivable crime of borrowing a school spoon because I had mislaid the usual wooden one. Mrs. Pringle has never allowed me to forget this deplorable lapse. At 1:15, the children come back into their desks, breathless and cheerful, and after we have marked the register, we tackle our joint composition again. After a while, afternoon somnolence begins to descend on them, and when I thought they had studied a fair sample of English, for which they had been driven into producing long enough, I went to the piano and we sang some songs which they had learnt the term before. After play, large sheets of paper were given out and the boxes of wax crayons, and the children were asked to illustrate either their day at the seaside or any other particular day that they had enjoyed during the past few weeks. Industriously they set to work. Blue crayons were scrabbled furiously along the bottoms of papers for the sea, and yellow suns like daisies flowered on all sides. The room was quiet and happy. The afternoon sun beat in through the Gothic windows, and the clock on the wall stepped out its measured tread to home time at 3:30. As most of the children stay to dinner, and those who do go home live so very near, it seems wiser to have a short break at midday, start afternoon school early, and finish early. In the summer, this means that the children get a long spell of sunshine outdoors, and in the winter they can be safely home before it becomes dark. We collected up our pictures and crayons and tidied up the room. The first day at school is always a long one, and the children looked sleepy. The infants, who had been let out earlier, could be heard calling to each other as they ran up the road. We stood and sang grace, wished each other good afternoon, and made our way into the lobby. Jimmy and Joseph were standing there anxiously waiting for Kathy. "Did you enjoy school?" I asked them. Jimmy nodded. What about you, Joseph? I like the dinner, he answered diplomatically in his husky gypsy voice. I left it at that. Miss Clare was wheeling her bicycle across the playground. It struck me suddenly that she was looking old and tired. She mounted carefully and rode slowly away down the road, upright and steady, but it seemed to me, as I stood watching her progress, that it needed more effort than usual. This was only the first day of term. How long, I wondered, would she be able to continue? I had my tea in the warm sunshine of the garden at the back of my schoolhouse. The schoolmaster who had lived here before me was a great gardener and had planted currant bushes, black and red, raspberries, and gooseberries. These were safely enmeshed in a wire run to keep the birds off, and I bottled the crops or made jelly and jam in the evenings or in the holidays. I had planted 2 herbaceous borders, one on each side of the garden, both edged with Mrs. Siskin's pinks, which liked the chalky soil. Vegetables I did not bother to plant, not only because of the lack of room, but also because kind neighbors gave me more than I could really cope with, week after week. Broad beans, shallots, peas, carrots, turnips, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, they all came in generous supplies to my doorstep. Sometimes the donors were almost too generous, forgetting, I suppose, how relatively little one woman can eat. I have found before now no less than 5 rotund vegetable marrows like abandoned babies on my doorstep in 1 week. The difficulty is in handing these over to someone who might like them without offending the giver. In a village, this is doubly difficult, as almost all are related or close neighbors or know exactly what is going on in the cottages nearby. I have been driven to digging dark secret holes under cover of night and shoveling in many an armful of lettuce or several mammoth parsnips that have beaten my appetite. I made some jam in the evening with a basket of early black plums which John Pringle, Mrs. Pringle's only son, and a near neighbor of mine, had brought me. The kitchen was very pleasant as I stirred. The window over the stone sink looks out on the garden. A massive lead pump with a long handle stands by the side of the sink, and it is from this that I fill the buckets for the school's drinking water. When the water supply is laid on throughout the village, which may be in a few years' time, I've been promised a new deep sink by the managers. In one corner stands a large brick copper, and my predecessors used this to heat water for their baths, lighting a fire each time. But I have an electric copper, which saves much time and trouble. The bath is a long zinc one, which hangs in the porch outside the back door, and it is put on the kitchen floor at bath time and filled from the tap at the bottom of the copper and cooled with buckets from the pump. With a bath towel warming over the hot copper and the kitchen well steamed up, it is very snug. The rest of the house downstairs consists of a large dining room with a brick fireplace, a small hall, and a small sitting room. I rarely use this room as it faces north, but live mainly in the dining room, which is warmer, has a bigger fireplace, and is convenient for the kitchen. Upstairs there are 2 bedrooms, both fairly large, one over the kitchen and sitting room, and the other in which I sleep directly above the dining room. Throughout the house the walls are distempered a dove gray, and all the paintwork is white. It is a solidly built house of red brick with a red-tiled roof, and in its setting of trees it looks most attractive. I am very fond of it indeed, and luckier, I realize, than many country headmistresses. And that is the pattern of the day, morning and afternoon, and we will work our way through this first year record next time.